Sure.
perspective. This is what it's all about.
Right.
And this guy, I forgot his name, unfortunately, listened and listened. And finally, at the end, he said, I think I can help the both of us. When we have a comrade who's fallen in battle, we go to the grave, we kneel. I
Sure.
think you should do that. And that was the reason he switched from sitting on the bench to kneeling. And that
Gotcha.
tells you as much about him as it does about the cause.
Wow.
Wow. So, Jerry, how you doing, sir?
How am I doing?
Yes, sir.
Well, my feet still touch the ground, and
Okay.
reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, as Mark Twain once said. And
Well,
when people say, "How are you doing?" I tell them, and it's the truth. I am not doing as well as I want to, but I'm doing a lot better than I have a right to because I'm 88 years old.
Well, I can tell you, Jerry,
Absolutely.
if you were sitting up in here dead, you'd be sitting in here by yourself.
well, Jerry, you've been around sports for a while, and your reputation is great. My question to you, when you consider basketball, and we were talking about the trading and stuff, do you feel that the quality of sports, speaking of basketball, has the quality of the game diminished?
Well, it diminished a little bit for me, and I'll tell you why. I'm 5'7", and I went to high school shortly after dirt was discovered. And I played basketball, but the game was played under the rim. I love that game, which is why I love the WNBA so much because they play under the rim, and it's more of an artistic sports ballet when you watch them. But in any event, the talent, if you're thinking about the NBA or the colleges, the talent is so much better than it was when I was growing up, when I was young in the business or whatever. What is not better is the achievements of the game. I marvel at for example, when a guy takes 11 steps and scores a basket, and everybody says that's his 94th point of the week, and he gets that extra step because it's the NBA.
Hmm.
That's not the game I grew up with. That doesn't make it this not as good as it, but I think it diminishes a little bit. The rule changes diminish it. And the fact that, to me, the biggest rule, when you get traded from, say, the Knicks to the Bulls,
Hmm.
the biggest play that you don't even have to look at the playbook for is when the guy with the ball takes his hand, puts it out front, makes a hooking motion, which means everybody get out of the way, and it becomes a one-on-one game.
Right.
Basketball, you got to remember something. I was a young, well, let's see, how young was I? I was a college kid, and I just came into business that year. I saw CCNY win the NCAA and the NIT, and the NIT then was more important than the NCAA. This is 1951. And that can never happen again because the schedule won't let it happen. But they played such a team game, that CCNY team. Nat Holman was the coach, and if you didn't pass the ball 5 times before the shot, you came out of the game.
Right.
Now, I don't particularly care for 98 to 97 games. But you got to remember, we have generations that have been brought up with that as the only basketball they knew. And when they talk about, look at that Seattle defense. My goodness, they held that team to 92 points. Either my vocabulary is different or my knowledge of the game is. I think defense has you get magnificent individual defensive plays in basketball because of the one-on-one concept of the way they're playing it. But I love the other game. I really did. And that's why I prefer the college game to the pro game. And I'm starting now to sort of, I won't say turn my nose up, but be a little skeptical of the college game because one and done does not prove anything. Then you're recruiting players just like the NBA is recruiting them. But I will say this. It's a hell of a game. It requires probably more stamina than any game except hockey. It requires the ability. Every sequence is different. Unfortunately, the way they're playing makes a lot of them the same. But the concept of basketball, tremendous. And I love the game. I really do. And I think there is no tournament in this country to compare to the NCAA tournament, basketball.
Yeah, it's a great game. I love the college game as well. I'm just considering the pros. I was reading how Kevin Durant has waived his rights to the contract that the Golden State Warriors have extended to him, which makes him a free agent. Do you think that this money deal with the NBA has challenged the integrity of the game as well as these players? It seems as if
well, you're on the right track. Let me put it this way, though. I mean, first of all, I don't have anything against anybody making money honestly, which they do.
Absolutely.
Because I never made any, so I can appreciate what it means to have it. Conversely, though, the influence of money and television on all the games has changed the whole concept. I saw guys do tremendous things in sports, all sports. And the example I use is Willis Reed, I guess it was 71, 72, somewhere. The Knicks had never won a title. And he had a terrible knee situation. And he limped off in Game 5. And he couldn't make the trip to California to play the Lakers. And the Lakers win it on Jerry West's incredible shot. Now they come back to the Garden. Now, this is the way I view the game in the Garden. Willis can't play. We know that every day. What's his status? He can't play. Dr. Donnie, who did the operation, said maybe he could play, but I just don't see him as being effective. Mm-hmm. All right, now because I'm working, I get to a ball game like maybe 2-3 hours before it starts. So I'm there, and the Lakers are shooting around, and I say hello to them. After a while when you're all around, you know the guys, and Chamberlain says to me, "Is he playing?" And I said, I don't know, but if you're asking me, do I expect him to play? No, I don't. Well, I watched during the warm-up, he kept looking toward the tunnel that led from the Knicks locker room. Now out come the Knicks, right? Wild applause. This is New York City, who think they think they invented basketball. They never won an NBA title, and they're going crazy. This is the 7th game. Now the teams are getting ready to line up. They're getting ready for the introductions. And who walks out of the tunnel from the Knicks dressing room? Willis Reed. And Chamberlain looks at him, and then he turns away. The game starts. Now, Willis couldn't play very long. I mean, he could hardly walk. But on the very first sequence, he hits a little jump shot. And then he scores again. And Chamberlain, who is a great competitor, I mean, it just seemed to take something out of him. But the way I put it all together, anybody who can defeat a great competitor by being also a great competitor, that's a plus. Secondly, you're playing a championship game, and there's no more games after this. That's another plus. And then I got to think about what always interests me, the courage of Willis Reed that night. Courage is such an overused word. And guys are playing, all these guys are playing a little boy's game that they get paid to play. And basically, that's what it's all about. I mean, you can go see, today in my retirement, semi-retirement, I will hasten to it, I'll go look at a high school football game. Because I know everybody out there is trying as hard as they can, and nobody's saying, gee, my option's up this year. That's the edge I don't want athletes to lose. They play with their hearts and their souls, and when they lose, they cry a little bit, but they get over it. They get over it. It's like I used to tell my English students. I taught college for a couple of years, and I used to tell them, English is the greatest language in the world, because every year, all of you people in this class leave it torn and bleeding on the battlefield, and it gets up again to play against you the next day. I like that in sports. The emotion that you lose, you lose. Let me tell you one of my favorite things about what sports can mean to people. I'm in Japan, This was not. I was just way after the Korean War, which I was in. This is probably about 20 years ago, and my daughter at that time was married to a Marine flyer, and we were visiting them in Okinawa. So I take a little walk, and I'm walking down the street, and I see this big stadium. So I asked a cop I was standing out there, what is, and he spoke very good English. I said, what's going on here? Why is this stadium? He said, well, the Chunichi Dragons of the Japan Pacific League come here because of the weather for spring training. They built the stadium, but they let all the kids use it when they want to use it, the high school kids. So I said, I see cars here. Let me go in and see if there's a game on. Well, I sit down, and it's about maybe 200 spectators in this big, big stadium. And it's two high school teams. And I'm sitting about 5 feet away from a very attractive woman wearing in a kimono. And she says to me, you like baseball? I said, yeah, I do. My father was a professional ball player. And she said, you like that pitcher? I said, yeah. She said, he's my son. So now we're sitting together and we're talking about the game. And it's a very good game. He strikes out the side in the last inning. The game ends. All of a sudden, I'm in another world. The players on one team are running into the dugout, and they're pulling out rakes and drags and things like that. Players on the other team are running into the stands, and they're picking up all the garbage that the fans left, the wrappers and the stuff. Now they're on the field. They make 2 lines. Before they bow to each other, before they bow to the umpires, they bow to the groundskeeper. And I said to this woman, I said, what's that all about? I never saw. She said, well, they should bow to him. They must be grateful for the field he has given them. And I thought to myself, I think of a lot of high school kids I know. And if the coach said to them, now after you clean up the stands, they say, you want me to do what? That's what I wrote a column after that called Respect for the Game. That's something that's a little bit lacking now.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to run off on a tangent like that, but that's how I feel.
Wow. That's great. And one of the things that I wanted to find out from you, Jerry, we started off talking a little bit about Colin Kaepernick and his silent protest, if you will. When you were covering that whole incident, what parallels were you drawing with what Colin was doing and what you saw Muhammad Ali do during his time?
First of all, I gave them all the introduction, telling them I was a vet. My dad was a wounded vet, and how we felt. So nobody could say you don't care for America.
I got you.
But I told them a story about a young lady at the Merchant Marine Academy, and I know that your listeners have never heard this story. She was opposed to the Vietnam War. She played basketball for the Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, Long Island, and they're playing games. And she turns her back on the they're all facing the flag and the field and the court. She turns her back the other way. Never says anything, never does anything disrespectful, but just looks the other way. And after a while, no, she didn't play Kings Point. I'm sorry, she played against Kings Point. That's when it happened. I don't remember the school she played for, a small Division III college. But she caught hell later on for it. And she said, look, I don't stop anybody from saluting the flag or anything else. I love this country. I don't love the Vietnam War. This is the only way I can show people what I feel. She's 18, 19 years old. My respect went up for her. I told that story in that series of stuff I did on Kaepernick. But there's always going to be imbeciles out there. And the guy who brought it home to me more than anybody else is my friend of 50 years, Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. When I started to defend him, and first of all, let me explain my position on that if we have the time.
Go ahead.
My position was the Constitution. When I was a little kid, most kids hide from their parents and listen to the baseball game in their room with the lights over. I used to listen to a show called Town Hall Meeting of the Year. I was like 10. It was a political show. Mm-hmm. Great debates in Town Hall, New York. So I'm listening to a debate between Everett Dirksen, the senator from Illinois, a great orator, and the guy who later became vice president from Kentucky. He'll come to me in a minute. And anyway, the guy from Kentucky said the subject was Is the Constitution a dead document? Now, this is in the 40s. Alvin Barkley was his name.